Good morning. Welcome to my 30-day challenge, Pranayama, Subtle Secrets of Pranayama. Today is day 9, and it's a nice day to breathe. Every day is a nice day to breathe. So we've been talking about the more subtle aspects of pranayama more than the techniques up to this point, and we'll continue to do that for a little while. So we sort of started in the face area, noticing the breath and all of the different nuances that happen. If you missed some of those videos, please go back and look at the previous days. And yesterday we got as far as the throat. We were talking about ujjayi. And now, so what's going to happen, of course, is the breath is going to come in to the chest and diffuse. But before we talk about that, we'll get to that hopefully tomorrow. What I want to talk about today is the diaphragm and what's called diaphragmatic breathing, because that is something that all of us who've been around for a while in the yoga world, and even if you just started doing yoga, that is probably something that you've heard, this idea of diaphragmatic breathing. The reason I go diaphragmatic breathing is because all breathing, unless you're on a respirator, is diaphragmatic. It has to be, because that is the primary muscle. There's primary, secondary, and tertiary muscles of respiration. The primary muscle of respiration is your diaphragm. So let's talk about the diaphragm. It looks kind of like an umbrella when it's at rest, and as you inhale, it presses down, goes down. I don't know if you can see, but I'm going to change my camera just a little bit here and see if you can see better. So diaphragm, right? I'm doing Instagram and Facebook at the same time, so sometimes my Facebook camera obscures my Instagram. So let's see if that's better. Anyway, let me see if I put this down. I want to show you just so I can point to my diaphragm a little bit. Hi, thanks for being here, everybody. So the diaphragm is going to connect under your ribs, right? And it wraps around, and it actually has little fingers that go down of the muscle that go down into your lumbar spine. So very much connected to the lumbar spine, and is going to be connected to lumbar health as well, right? So as you breathe in, that diaphragm is pressing down into the abdominal organs, the abdominal cavity, and creating kind of some movement. It's actually one of the biggest movers of the lymphatic fluid through the system. Maybe you saw some of the science that came out last week talking about this new interstitium, which is considered an organ by science. Of course, we've been calling it fascia in the body work and yoga world for many, many years. But what we know is that the lymph is carrying, it's diffusing nutrients into the cells and then taking the waste from the cells and carrying it through the system. How does it move? It doesn't have a pump like the heart. It's the diaphragm. The diaphragm is pressing down into the abdominal organs. It's a major mover of the lymphatic fluid through the system, because the system, as I said, doesn't have a pump. It's not like the heart. So very important what's going on as you're breathing. So when we talk about diaphragmatic breathing, what people are saying is like, let's breathe more deeply, essentially. Breathe into your belly, for example, instead of keeping the breath up here. And there are reasons to do that. There are reasons not to do that. We'll get to that at some point as we talk about it, because there are many different theories of breath. And here's the thing that you should know, that respiration is an incredibly complex, sophisticated process that even the scientists don't fully understand, which is why there are so many different theories out there about breathing. So what we can do is look to the yoga tradition and say, hey, what have people been doing for thousands of years? What seems to be helpful? And let's parse that out. As at the same time we talk about science, let's parse that out a little bit, right? So one of the things that I think is helpful, and we're going to focus on today, as opposed to just breathing into the belly here, is letting the diaphragm move in with this interoceptive awareness, right? In a more of a 360 degree, it's not even, it's like 3D 360 degree, right? So it's more of a spherical shape. So you know those toys that are made of triangles, and they kind of expand and get smaller, and they look like a Buckminster Fuller, because they are structure. So that's kind of what you want to think about here. My teacher, Gary Kraftsuk, calls it solar plexus breathing, or sometimes they talk about it like sun breath. So you're breathing into this 360 degree space. And what that is doing is helping you to again, deliver more interoceptive awareness to the brain, so you get better feedback to the brain to help you create more homeodynamic regulation in the system. So as we're breathing, and you can go ahead and do that now if you like, as you're breathing, not so much thinking into your belly, but breathing into your diaphragm. So you're feeling that 360-degree movement in and out from this area. Now, yesterday we talked about the sound of the breath, and previously we've talked about all the sensations in the face and the throat. But right now, the focus here on the actual dynamics, or the actual function that's happening as you breathe. And I can't really breathe while I'm talking, but I'm breathing while I'm talking, but that's a different kind of behavioral regulation of the breath. What you're doing in terms of the behavioral regulation is thinking about that entire area, and even the little fingers that reach down into your lumbar spine of the diaphragm. That's an interesting observation, isn't it? It's an interesting exercise. Just go and think about the diaphragm moving in and out. So many people talk about the core in yoga, right? And often they say, oh, we're gonna blast the core or work the core, or yoga for core strength. And usually what they're doing, and which was a revelation 20 years ago, was, oh, the core is not just your rectus abdominis. You actually have 4 layers of abdominal muscle, and the deepest layer kind of wraps around like a corset, and it's called the transverse abdominis, and that's your core. Well, I would suggest that a further evolution of that thinking is that the core is deeply connected to this diaphragm, right? As we're breathing, what do you notice in the deep abdominal muscles? And as you notice the exhale, it gets a little bit supported by some tone of the transverse abdominis. So gently toning those abdominal muscles is supportive to respiration. Everything is connected. This was so fun to unravel the system, I think, and the yogis deeply understood this. So take this diaphragmatic, or whatever you want to call it, breathing. All breathing is diaphragmatic, but take this diaphragmatic awareness with you today. And I love it when you leave comments and questions. I'm happy to respond to those. You can look over the previous days in the challenge and let me know how it's going for you, okay? Tomorrow we're going to get into some more of the musculature of breathing. We'll get into pranayama techniques after we kind of go through the system of breathing, okay? So it might be next week sometime when we get to the techniques. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow. Namaste.